let's talk about your book. First off, I love the title, The Strange Death of Europe. I thought using the adjective strange was particularly interesting. Why did you choose the word strange, not slow or a series of other things that you could have used?
The first is it's a nod which not many readers will get to a slightly known history textbook called The Strange Death of Liberal England, which described the decline of the Liberal Party in the early part of the 20th century. But that sort of isn't needed, as it were, to know it, although there is a slight similarity. Yes, the real thing is it is odd. I mean, it's a curious way to go. And I think if you'd have said to anyone of 1 or 2 generations ago that this would be what Europe's issues would be in the 21st century, that basically it couldn't find any way not to just allow the world to walk in and join them, that those generations would have been surprised. And so yes, it is strange. But I try to explain why, and in order to explain it, I try to explain it not just from the sort of first-hand accounts and the statistics and all that sort of thing, but the deeper philosophical reasons why this is happening. I think that's, lots of books do bits of that, but I wanted to just say, look, this is the whole overall picture. This is what we're actually living through, and this is why.
Yeah, so the subtitle is Immigration, Identity, and Islam. Does that order have any meaning to you in the way you phrase those 3 words?
Not particularly. I mean, it centres on the 2015 migration crisis, when Angela Merkel opened the doors of Europe and couldn't really find a way to shut them again. But they'd already been open for a long time, as I explain. No, I mean, it's these are the 3 massive things that are preoccupying, I think, not just Europe, but Europeans at the moment. The immigration crisis, where the publics of Europe just want it to stop all across the continent. All the polls all show the same thing. The public want it to slow down or stop. So that's the immigration bit of it. The identity bit of it is the very, very painful thing, which, people aren't very good at talking about. Maybe I'm not very good at talking about it, but I think it's just there underlying everything. What is this thing? What is it to be a European? Who can be European? Can anyone be? And is Europe a home for the peoples who've been in Europe, or is it home for anyone in the world who wants to move in and call it home? These are very, very big questions.
Yeah, these are big ones.
And then the third one of that is the Islam bit, which I mentioned because it's obviously the sharpest bit of this. You can have somebody move in. I know you can have a Nigerian Christian move into a bit of the south of England, and they will have issues they bring, as everyone does. They will have their own ideas, as everyone does, their own culture that they've walked in from, and everyone does. But it would be the person of another background, from another community, another faith, who would be coming in with the issues that are really starting to gnaw at Europe. We find this very hard to talk about, and it's getting easier very, very slowly. But our big worry is we've not been great on the integration. All of our leaders say this. All the European politicians admit this now. But the bit that is worrying us is the Islam bit, because I think there's now a general awareness that maybe this is the bit we can't digest, or we're finding it unusually difficult to digest and incorporate. I don't say it's impossible, by the way. I just think for all sorts of reasons it's proving very hard, and may in the years ahead prove far worse.
So I know that you often make the distinction, like most educated people, you make the distinction between Islam as a set of ideas, as any religion is simply a set of ideas, versus Muslim as people. Sure. In this case, do you think that there is something unique? I mean, this is always what triggers my friends on the left. If you say that there is something unique about the set of ideas of Islam that is different than the set of ideas, if we just take the big 3 monotheistic ones, that is different than the set of ideas of Judaism or Christianity, or at least how they're practiced, I think is the more operative part, because you can look through all the books and there's plenty of bad stuff in the Old Testament. Do you, at the end of this, do you believe that it's just incompatible that this set of ideas is incompatible with the set of ideas that the West is trying to preserve.
I think unreformed Islam presents a very significant values challenge, and it's probably not reconcilable. If we have, as it were, the Islam of most Muslim countries, it's very hard to see how that's doable. I think all of this is very painful, isn't it? Because first of all, we live in any case in an age of relativism already, where for perfectly good reasons sometimes, we sort of pretend it's all sort of the same, like I might be a Muslim, you might be a Christian, she does yoga. And it all comes out in the wash, pretty much the same. And I just think that's, to begin with, that's obviously not true. I mean, it's very strange to want to concentrate on everything other than the premises and origins of a belief structure. And as I've often said, stop me if I've said this to you before, but I mean, there are all sorts of problems in the Christian religion and in Christian history, but as I've often said, just carry out the thought experiment that instead of getting up at the Sermon on the Mount and saying, love thy neighbor and forgive people endlessly, Jesus had said, if your brother offends you, chop his head off. Would Christianity's history have been more bloody or less bloody? I think we can all agree it's going to be more.
Right, or find the Jew behind the tree.
Yeah. If Jesus had got into
I know Jesus didn't say that.
But if Jesus had got into the whole, find the Jew behind the tree and slaughter him, bit, whatever the context, then there would be even more Christian anti-Semitism and than there has been historically. So I just think these things matter. And all this is very, very painful for a reason that I go into in some depth in the book, which is that in recent years, we in countries like Britain, and I think in America, have had the luxury of sort of describing ourselves in terms that, among other things, have been universal. That what we have should also be universal. Now, this is always a debate within liberalism, of course. Is liberalism something we have or something we, as it were, expound and expand? In recent years, I think that a certain moroseness has landed across Europe, among other things, because of a growing awareness that maybe what we have is very unusual, and that we have become disassociated from the roots from which what we enjoy grew. And this is a problem. There's a German legal theorist I quote in the book who puts this as one of the central conundrums for Europe. Is it possible that the thing we're enjoying and living through can survive without the connection to its roots? And I believe that the roots of the West and of Europe in particular are fairly clear, and it's a combination of things. It's the inheritance from ancient Greece and ancient Rome. It's obviously the inheritance of the Christian civilization that washed throughout the continent. And then the refining fire of the Enlightenments and skepticism and all these things. And of course, we could go on endlessly about the other things that have added to it, but broadly speaking, that is what made Europe Europe and what made a European a European. They breathe this air. But the sort of the last man at the end of that, which I fear modern Europeans are, is in this strange position of finding it hard to even identify where he and she has come from, let alone being able to return to those roots and nurture them. Because we all have, I have, I'm sure you have, a conflicted set of views about this. Is it necessary for other people to believe? Those of us who have sometimes been tempted to hope that, for instance, skepticism is enough, constantly depressed by the discovery that, for instance, somebody may be a free thinker about God, and that's it from the free thinking point of view. From then on, it's tribe all the way, and we're all living through this. But it's for Europe, I think that the combination of historically unprecedented movement of people into the continent, at the same time that this sort of breakdown of what we are ourselves is going on, is a fatal thing.
So there's a lot there that I want to hit, but what you said right at the beginning, which is that if Islam, if unreformed, or not allowed to reform. So I think that's particularly interesting for the space that you and I sort of exist in, because I have many allies who are reformers. I'm not just, I have allies that are ex-Muslim, I have allies that are Muslim, and many, many people that I've interviewed that you know, but they're treated horribly. Horribly, and every time they're allowed to get a platform or talk, it's actually by the evil conservatives or the evil right, or all the things that people who don't like me will say about me or say about you or any of that stuff. That makes the job a gajillion times harder.
I say in the book towards the end, when I try to rouse myself to some prognostications about all this, that this is the worst possible sign. Not just that the people that we might talk about in these terms are so few, and that between us, you and I might have them in our phone books. Not just that, but who are the ones that are most under pressure and under risk. They really are they're the good guys. To say that this is a tragedy for Islam is obvious, but it's always been my view that we should try to avoid making ourselves a casualty of Islam's civil internal strife. And I think we haven't done that. I think we've spent recent decades almost deliberately running towards a fight that didn't need to involve us, so that the tragedy of Islam becomes the tragedy of the West as well. I hoped this could be avoided, but I think it can't. And I think that, as I say, the worst possible sign for the future is that it's Hamid Abdel Samed in Germany who lives under protection. It's Majid Nawaz who comes in for all the grief in the UK. It's Ayaan Hirsi Ali who followed the Dutch integration ideal more than anyone, who ends up having to leave Holland. These are very, very bad signs. You can still live openly as a Hamas military commander in London. Your life's fine.
Yeah, you'll be celebrated in some ways, right? I mean, this is a huge problem. All right, so let's knock out each one of these words. We've sort of hit, I think, a bit of each one already. On the immigration front, when you said that Merkel just opened the doors, I see a lot of different stuff written about her, that she either intentionally, you get sort of the conspiracy people that she wanted to destroy Europe, or she hates her own country and all this stuff. I try not to impugn everyone's motives, but when this happened in 2015, and there was this combination of refugees and immigrants and migrants, and nobody could figure out what was happening, and we saw videos of people, just thousands of people just running across borders and all of this stuff, and an odd amount of them that seemed to be men in their 20s and not women and children and all that, which implies that they're often migrants looking for work.
Even the EU's own figures, the Frontex figures, say the majority of the people who came in 2015 have no right to be in Europe.
Which is fascinating, and somehow even if you say that, you'll be labeled whatever. But what do you think her intention was in 2015?
Well, this is why I try to go back to the beginning, not just with history, but also with the philosophy on this. I don't impute, terrible motives to her. I think that she was blackmailed by history, was facing a truly terrible humanitarian crisis, which was undoubtedly going on. And I stare this in the face. I travel around and speak to many, many migrants from all over the world. I've been to many of the countries they've fled from, but I also go to speak to them in the countries that they arrive into and speak to them in the camps. And certainly have met and listened to more migrants than I think any of my critics. But it's easy to exaggerate the ease of the situation that she faced, or the ease of the solution to it, and I think that shouldn't be done. It was a genuine crisis. It remains a genuine crisis, and the biggest imaginable moral question. So we also know that at the moment that she made the decision in 2015 to basically suspend all border controls, I suggested in my book, but since my book has come out, it's already now being confirmed by somebody who was with her at the time, that what happened in particular was that somebody said to Merkel, we cannot have German border guards repelling migrants, and the photos go around the world.
Right. So this is just condemned because of history.
It's what one French philosopher calls the second career of Adolf Hitler. It's an ugly way of looking at it, but it's not entirely implausible. This is another go around this terrible, terrible history and past. But it's not conspiracy. I show in the book how much it's more what we call in England cock-up. I've always tended towards a cock-up view of history, because if you see politics up close, as I have done quite a bit throughout my life, you know that it's not really people pursuing grand sort of schemes, really. It's people who haven't done the job before because you can't, and there is no qualification that gets you in position beforehand, and trying to deal with not long-term things, but tomorrow morning's headlines and, media action the next hour, and they drown below the surface of this babble.
Yeah.
That's how politics happens these days.
Right, which is not the way that both sides talk about politics. They want to make it seem like the other side has constantly this grand plan and everything's going according to plan. Or
as I say in the book, every single thing we thought would happen didn't happen, and nothing that has happened was expected. I go back to the 50s. The guest workers who were the first people who came in after the war. The first migrant waves into Europe from Turkey and elsewhere. As Merkel herself said in 2010, we expected them to go home. That's an incredible muck-up.
Yeah.
But then we expected them to go home, then it didn't. Of course, they wanted, having tasted first world, economics, among other things, they wanted to bring their families, and of course, and if you have your families, you have more children, and you'll enter the schooling system, and then you'll need healthcare, and then you'll need this and that.
Especially if the state's giving you a lot of those things.
And that's why we are where we are, where the 2011 census identified people who call themselves white British on the census as a minority in London, a minority in 23 out of the 33 London boroughs. It's why all the demographic projections from across the continent show Europeans, I think, not to overstate it, losing the place they had to call home, or at least becoming a minority in it. And this, there are some people who talk about that in the sort of language of, the empire strikes back, now you're getting a taste of it, you went round the world and now the world's come to you. And among other things, I warn those people, just be careful of that language, the language of punishment. Because if the language of that is, as it were, the punishment for colonialism, then down the road you'll create a movement that will say, well, we managed to end colonialism.
Yeah, and then they'll come for you too, no matter what you do. So with that being said, so the identity part then is obviously inextricably linked to this. When you see this sort of what seems to be the rising white identitarian movement or European identitarian movement or whatever, what do you make of it? Do you view it purely as the natural reaction to this? Is there anything legitimate out of that? Are there parts that are not racist, or is it truly based in race?
I'm very, very worried about this at the moment, I have to say. Very, very worried. If you have people saying, I'm proud of the colour of my skin because it's this skin colour, of course there will be some people who'll do the opposite. Somebody said to me the other day, I think it's a question, are you proud of being white? And I said, no, of course not. Why would I be proud of a pigmentation? But I then turned around and said, no, but if you ask me if I'm proud of my culture, I'd say, of course. But it's something else than that. It's not really about pride in the culture. Some years ago, I wrote a piece about this for a book the Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, was editing on Britishness. And I said, I don't think of these things in terms of patriotism. I think of it in terms of gratitude. I feel gratitude for what I've been lucky enough to be born into. I'd love it if other people who wanted to be part of it became a part of it, and I think they can. And I think it shouldn't be and can't be racially exclusionary. I mean, it's madness. But it's a madness that seems to me that some people will be falling into by being pushed and by being ignorant and other things. But I come back to this thing, there will be some people who will, and I've found this a lot in conversations across the continent in the last year or two, there will be people who will grab a bit of the identity thing for themselves for tactical reasons. We will get to this goal and we'll use a dishonest tactic just like you're using it.
Yeah.
And there will be other people who will say, no, it's not just a tactic, it's what I feel, it's what I believe. I just strongly urge people not to go down that route. Strongly urge them not to go down the route of identifying by an accident of skin pigmentation, but to say if you want to talk in terms of values and in terms of civilization and of culture, You cannot make it exclusionary like that. But the point about this is that can't only be that it's the, as it were, white young guy who's told that.
Right.
You've also got to tell it to the angry young black demagogue who's telling people of their own skin color to isolate and congregate around race. Everyone's got to, to make the deal, as it were, on this.
Yeah.
But I just am filled with concern about this.
And that probably has a little something to do with the word strange, because
Yeah.
it seems to me that it's possible that the ship has already sailed on this, perhaps more in Europe than in America, because you guys had an integration problem already,
Right.
which is finally being acknowledged now, but then you also have this new set of people. So even if everything was fantastic
Yeah.
with all the people that were there and all the integration before 2015,
Yeah.
what do you even do with just the new set of problems?
Let me give you an example, by the way. In Scotland, there's it's a small amount now, but Catholic Protestant, mainly centred around football supporting Celtic Rangers. They go by religious affiliation.
Okay.
Still.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah, that's...
Okay. Because of a movement of Catholics from Ireland into Scotland a long time ago.
Yeah.
Let me give you another example. I had a very dear friend who died recently, who was a brilliant, very, very brave man called Sean O'Callaghan, who was a double agent within the IRA during the Troubles, and he got up to the top of the IRA command, and he was informing all the time to the Irish state and saved many, many lives. He was an extraordinary, extraordinary man. I wrote an obituary for him, and others of his friends did. One of the most negative, in fact, one of the only negative pieces about Sean was in the Boston Globe, who referred to him as a grass, as somebody who, after he'd come out and written his memoirs, came to hawk them around America. Not just selling a book or promoting a book, hawking a book. Why would that appear in the Boston Globe? Only because a very long time ago, a large number of people from Ireland arrived in this country and settled in Boston and held on to their Irish identity. And some of them held on to a belief that the IRA, a murderous, murderous sectarian gang, were, as it were, their people. So all these centuries later, the attitude in the Boston Globe, when a man who risked his life and saved many, many other people's lives dies, is to attack him basically as a grass and a snitch. Okay, that's the movement of Catholic Irish people into America. Who on earth thinks that when you bring the entire developing world into Europe, including very, very large numbers of young men from the Muslim world, that this is going to be sorted out by next February?
Yeah.
Or roughly this time next year.
So does this show, I use the phrase lazy thinking a lot, but maybe that's not the right way. It shows an inability to think. You know, what you said about Merkel in 2010, it's like, well, we thought they were going to leave. That's not lazy thinking. That's, man, did you even think? I mean, it's pretty good in Germany. You know, if you let people in, is there ever been a self-imposed group of people that left a Western country to go back?
It's
I don't think
very,
so.
very uncommon. I mean, of course, once people realize that the economics works better in Western Europe than it does in sub-Saharan Africa, of course they come. But we're just so torn about this, and I think we have to rouse ourselves to more than moroseness. We're torn about it seems to me, because we're not sure why. I mean, I'm pretty sure why, but as cultures, we're not entirely sure why it should be our right to keep anyone out. I mean, I hear this obviously in America. Now, America has a different issue, of course, which is America. It's legitimate to say America is a nation of immigrants. Yeah. It's not legitimate to say that about Britain. It just hasn't been, till the late 20th century, a nation of immigrants. It's been a very, very static population. Even the Norman conquest 1,000 years ago shifted the population by about 5% in the UK. So, I understand that in America, the whole thing to do with immigration is a bit harder. People feel they're talking not about them, but about you or me. And in Europe, that is a bit of the case now. There are people who talk in those terms, but there's also just this additional thing of, by what right? By what right would I be allowed to say anyone can't come? Now, I think there are all sorts of ways you argue it. I mean, the law should matter.
Right.
And the law should matter. The difference between legal and illegal is everything.
Yeah. Look,
Everything.
I'm not a Canadian. Why is that? Because we have a border.
Right.
And that means that a Canadian has to obey the laws of Canada.
Yeah.
And I have to obey the laws of the United States. People think that even in of itself, but that's somehow controversial.
By the way, what a beautiful thing it has been watching Justin Trudeau have to face this reality. It's so easy for politicians. In Europe, we've seen it a lot. You've seen it here in America. Canadians have seen it. It's so easy to grandstand on this. Let them in. Open the doors. Because when the effects happen, hopefully you'll be out of power and you'll be retired somewhere in a nice area with lots of people like you, which was your dirty little secret all along.
Right, he'll move to New Zealand or something. Yeah. Isn't that where they're all moving? New Zealand?
That's
New
one.
Zealand?
That's one.
That's
maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, Trudeau is one of the people who sort of berated and morally grandstanding. And then, of course, when this movement of people from America across the Canadian border, they start to get worried.
Right. Right.
Bill Gates, by the way, at the beginning of the migrant crisis, said that America should take in the same proportion of migrants that year as Germany did. Germany took in an extra 2% of its population in 1 year alone. And Bill Gates said we should take in the same numbers in Germany as Germany did in America. Interestingly enough, only a couple of months ago, Bill Gates did a reverse ferret on that. Actually, no, he said in a set of remarks that if Germany continues like this, it's going to destroy it. Well, imagine if Bill Gates, instead of being the world's richest man, had been in charge of anything. Mm-hmm. Then you'd have gone through what Germany is going through. And it would have vastly outlasted him, as this will outlast Merkel and all of us. Mm-hmm. So the issue, it seems to me, there's two things I can point out. One is demanding that our political leaders in particular think through things beyond the 2-year electoral cycle or the 4-year electoral cycle, or, more importantly, just tomorrow morning's headlines. Like, you might have a bad morning's news. It's a lot better than fucking up your country. It's a lot better. It really is. And the second thing about this is we have to develop the ability to have an adult discussion about these things that recognizes it's not between, you're for the migrants, I'm against them, or, you're Churchill, I'm Hitler, you're Chamberlain, you're Hitler. Just to have the discussion on recognizing that these are different opinions about our future. Mm-hmm. and that I say toward the end of the book that we have the tools for doing this. Aristotle showed us a long time ago. Yeah. This is just a competition between virtues. Angela Merkel, very understandably, felt the human virtue of mercy, to be merciful towards people who are trying to come. And I say, yes, but there is another virtue competing with that, which is the virtue of justice. And not just justice for the people of the world wanting to come and have a better life, but justice for the peoples of Europe. If you have the discussion on those terms, between competing virtues, not between good and evil, right and wrong, Churchill, Hitler, me good, you Nazi, then you might be able to get somewhere in this discussion. But it's as if we've sort of wounded ourselves before even starting at the start line.
Yeah. So as two people that try to engage in that, I think that's what we consistently try to do, and I see you debating all sorts of people from every walk of life.
Yeah, I have a promiscuous debating record.
You've debated basically everybody.
Everyone.
And
Some people are now in prison, not because I debated them so much they were prosecuted. But I mean, I've debated lots of people who.
I'm sure you've sent a couple people to mental institutions after they've had to deal with your wit and wrath.
No, it's not that. I mean, I definitely, if somebody is out in the general public and has a platform and they want to debate, I've always had the view yes.
Yeah.
That's not to say I'll debate anyone, by the way. Sometimes people go, oh yeah, you wouldn't debate me, and I think you've got 2 Twitter followers and you're nuts.
Yeah, so, and you're a blue fox on Twitter.
Yeah, you're like Xena Warrior Princess 19. No, I'm not.
She's after me too, that woman. She really wants to debate. All right, I think we got a nice holistic piece of this here. So I want to just shift altogether to end this on a something somewhat uplifting. As someone that does all this, that you speak about this stuff, you deeply care about this stuff. I worry about this stuff constantly. I'll be staring off into nothing in the middle of the day, and I'm literally worried about the fate of the Western world. I wish I was playing video games again as much as I used to. But
yeah, you lost me there.
I lost you on the video game thing. Yeah. But what do you do for fun? What do you do to just forget all this stuff and just enjoy yourself and be human?
Oh gosh. I
know you don't like this type of question because this is...
Well, I'm rather careful about, as it were, private matters. I'm very happily in a relationship of many years. I love my family. I've got wonderful friends. I see them a lot. To relax, I read all the time. Not just because it's enjoyable, but because it's just endlessly learning and thinking. And so it's just so stimulating sometimes when you have that thing of what I describe as catching up with a truth you'd always known was there. The thrill of recognition that you get from reading that I think is harder to find in video games or television.
All right, so you know
so I do a lot of reading.
I'll shift this a little then. So what would you say more importantly than that to the person that's watching this, the type of email that I get all the time, the person that is just a regular person, working a regular job, that sees these problems, that hears you, that is not a bigot and is not a racist, but is genuinely afraid of doing what you do every day, which is say what you think. That they're genuinely afraid of just putting their thoughts out there, be it on social media or be it's getting to the point where they're afraid to talk to their own spouses about these things. What could you say to somebody to give them a little bit of a boost on that?
I tell you what, the water's not as cold as people say. It really isn't. I mean, it's hard, this one, isn't it? Because there has been a lot of focus on the negatives, certainly some of the things we were talking about today in recent years. And there's a sort of growing feeling, and actually one of the previous recent interviewees, a Google guy, is a demonstration. The more that stuff happens, the more that people keep down. It's very hard you can't be brave for other people. You can't tell other people, speak up. But I think we can encourage each other to. I mean, sometimes people approach me in a sort of, I just want to change. It must be really hard, hard for you to live and so on. I go, no, it's great. I have cocktails with my friends. I go to concerts. I read things I want. I enjoy the music I love, and I travel where I like. And I go all over the world. And
we're not going to need any extra security tonight, are we?
I hope
we're going to Beverly Hills. I think we'll probably be all right.
It depends if you pick a fight with anyone today. But no, it's, do you see what I mean? There's a sort of exaggerated.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm asking you this question, because I do think it's partly in people's mind. You start speaking and then you realize, somebody said some bad stuff about me, but I'm still here.
Yeah, exactly. So people, quite a lot of the time, young journalists and things saying, I'd really like to write this, but I don't dare, and all this sort of thing, and I'll get this. Look, just see. And just write it. And no one ever awarded somebody for a career in journalism where they said nothing. Although there are some writers at the New York Times, you could say. But you just do it. And if it doesn't work, I'm very lucky in that I've spent my career saying what I think and being able to earn a living, precariously but successfully. And I feel like I can write for almost any of the newspapers I want to write for, and almost all of them will have me, and I love writing for the range of them, and I'm very lucky to do this. But it's not like that's rare. I mean, it's still legal to say what you think, and I just hate it when people say, I really admire you for saying what you think. You go, well, what the hell do you do? Yeah. And but it's only that we all get used to the idea. And just one other thing, which is just also, I don't know about you, but I find myself more and more tolerant of people's opinions. Just more and more tolerant of it. I mean, I see people driving themselves mad.
Yeah.
And I just sort of think, there are some things, like if somebody, I discovered they were into, kitty fiddling or something, and I'd have something to say to them. But pretty much, on politics and all sorts of other things, I find myself like, oh, that's interesting. Why do you think that?
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating. And who would want to keep all of that down? And as long as we agree on the parameters, as long as we agree that we don't shoot and stab each other, which is obviously up for negotiation, it seems, at the moment. But as long as we don't do that, then what's the problem? Just speak. Don't expect somebody else to do it for you. Don't siphon it off like some wing of government, like the Free Speech Centre. It's for you to do. It's for us to do. It's for everyone.
That's how you end an interview. Douglas Murray is on the Twitter. He is, I have just been informed, via the teleprompter, you're 1,000 followers away from 100,000.
Is that right?
I know you're monitoring this constantly.
Yeah.
You must have these. I think we can get you there.
Should I do something like, if I get 100,000 followers, I'll do something?
What would you do?
I don't know. We should discuss it.
We'll discuss it over drinks. All right, for more on Douglas, follow him on the Twitter. He doesn't care that much, but I want the man to get to 100,000. It's Douglas K. Murray. Thanks.